Hello, Sue.
Hi, Nancy. It's been a while.
It's been a while, and it was so fun to connect with you last week and meet Elo.
Eliana
it,
Elias.
Say her name again, please.
Eliana Elias.
From Minga, Peru.
Yes.
So, for our wonderful listeners, if you haven't caught that conversation with Sue and Eliana from Minga, Peru, please take a listen because it's extraordinary the work that they're doing. And we're excited here at First Press to support it. Sue, a lot's going on.
A lot is going on in the world today. Absolutely. We turn on the news and we have the question of when will it ever end? Yeah, we're looking at what's going on with, at first it was Afghanistan and Russia. And now, of course, that's kind of disappeared a little bit under what's going on in Israel and Palestine and Gaza. And that doesn't even begin to touch on the wars that never make the news. I remember reading at one point that at any given time period that there's about 20 wars going on in our world, most of which never make the news.
Yeah. Wow. So let's, I always like these conversations to shed light on kind of what we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some of this, like with the Israel Hamas thing, I mean, a friend of mine said this the other day. It's like, this is biblical, what's going on. And I thought, well, I wonder what Sue would say about that. Because to your point, I mean, humans have been treating humans poorly for centuries.
And we look at what's going on in, the region of the world where Israel and Palestine is, and wars have been going on there for millennia because it's at a critical transportation crossroads and always has been. And then of course now it's wrapped up in all the religious baggage that is informing a lot of that. But I look at what's going on there, and years ago I did my research and made a lot of presentations on the history of some of the war that's going on there. And I think a lot of us have the impression that, isn't it wonderful that after World War II, there was a homeland for Jews? We somehow have missed the history that says it was back in the 1800s when land started to be bought up secretly from Palestinians by Jews living in Europe with the idea of a Jewish homeland. But they would then come in and evict these families that have lived on that land for 1,000 years, because nobody told those people who lived there. It's like, oh, this is no longer just land for you to live on. We've decided to privatize it, and we didn't tell you so. So we have a history of land grabs going on there back to the 1800s. And so it's really hard, I'll be honest, it's really hard for me to totally say Israel, right or wrong, because I know that history, and who among us, if our families lived on land for 1,000 years, would appreciate finding out that, oh, we sold your land out from under you and you have 30 days to get off. Mm-hmm. And so I understand where a lot of the Palestinian anger is, but it's gotten so complicated. It's gotten tied up with American Zionism. A big part of how, after World War II, the land really became Israel as opposed to Palestine was because of the influence of American Jews who had this Zionist that they had to rebuild the temple there before the Messiah would come, and the land had to belong to the Jews. And we have American Christians that believe that Jesus won't come a second time until all of Palestine is Jewish. And again, that the temple is rebuilt. And so we have all of these different, we have the very practical issues of, I was kicked off my land, I'm angry about it, to all that religious layering that says my faith promises aren't going to be fulfilled until all of this happens. And so it's really, we ask, what can we do? It's hard to speak against some of the atrocities that are happening on the Israeli side because we get accused of being anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish. And how dare we do that in light of the Holocaust? So it's messy as we try to think of what we can do. And I think part of it is we need to ask ourselves, I think we need to, first of all, take the religious stuff out of it. These are human beings there. There was a hospital that was bombed. Now, I was watching the news this morning, and they, meaning the Israeli government and our own government, is saying, well, it was a misfired Palestinian rocket. I honestly don't know whether to believe that or not. We have enough of a history in our own country of putting out false information in support of a nation that I don't know whether to believe that or not. I don't care. There are children in that hospital. There are innocent civilians in that hospital. There are people who are just trying to live their lives. And the same thing in Israel, that community that was slaughtered. I don't care what their religion or politics were. They were just trying to live their lives. And so I think for myself, what can we do in light of this? First of all, is stop defending either side. Both sides have done atrocities. And I don't think either side is handling things the way it needs to if we really want peace. And I'm not convinced either side really wants peace.
Mm.
I really am not. I think we've heard enough about Hamas to know that they will never support a Jewish state. Compromise is not what they want. I don't want to say they would like to see Israel wiped off the face of the map, because I've not done the research to know if that's really their position, but it sure looks like it. And I know there are Jews who want the Palestinians wiped off the map and it be 100% Jewish. And so we have extremes on both ends that have done things that are just unthinkable and inhumane. And I think what we need to do is stop defending those actions, stop justifying them, and say we need to find a way to isolate the extremes so that the vast majority in the middle who just want to live their lives in peace can have that chance. How do you do that? I have no clue. I don't. While I don't always agree with the decisions our government makes about things like this, I'm also very glad I'm not the one they're making the decisions, because I know I don't know enough about what's going on to really come up with a good answer there. But I think we need to make our voices heard. I think we need to make our voices heard through the media. I think we need to make our voices heard in the seats of power in our government, and let them know that we have to find a better way. And I think, well, I'm probably going to get too political if I go too much further down that road. I'm going to got to stop that right there. But I also do think we need to find those voices that are more in the middle, that are trying to find that peaceful middle ground, and support them. Mm-hmm. Whether that's through our church denominations, whether that's through other nonprofits, or just a group that's risen up and gotten some lobbying power, but they're trying to not fall into the trap of either extreme, but really say, because the extremes are never going to get us there. How can we move forward? I think we need to find ways to support those organizations and support the work they do, and make our voices heard alongside of them, because we live in a world where the loudest voice gets the most attention. And you could be in a room of 100 people, and if 10 people are really yelling one way, no one's going to hear the other 90. we need to help that other 90, whether it's in our country, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Israel. We need to help that other 90 have a voice that's louder than those 10.
Mhm. Mhm. You know, thank you for sharing all that. I knew you would have I knew you would have some insight that would help me, and I think others as well. And I'll just sprinkle these 2 things in. So, I had a, fundraiser here this week for a friend of mine and her son are going on a medical mission to West Africa. And she said,
Mhm.
"Instead of gifts, I wanna raise money to buy rice when I'm there."
Okay.
And it's a medical mission for, like, eye surgery.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so they also wanted a lot of cheaters. They
Yeah.
wanted because
The
so
glasses. Yeah.
and then it was also, chewable vitamins for children or something. So she had the 3 things. And it was interesting because that we know her, we know the organization she's going with, so people just really generously donated, right? Because there was a trust there, right? We
Yeah.
know her, she talked about the group she's going with. And then that started a conversation and said, "Well, where do we send money if we
Yeah.
want to send money?" And so that led to a conversation. I said, "Well, what organization do you belong to?" And I was saying, like, church. So, like I
Hmm.
said, if
Hmm.
First Presbyterian Church identifies, here's here's the group,
Hmm.
that we vetted,
Yeah.
right? We
Hmm.
know that 9.9, 99.9% of the money will go to, the people
Yeah.
in need. That's how we that's how we can give, if you will,
Right.
without having to go through the mental gymnastics to figure out which funds are legit and
Mhm.
which funds are not. So I thought that was kind of interesting,
Yeah.
right? Because there's clearly the compassion has been raised.
Right. So then how do you put flesh on it? How do you actually then act on that? And that's one of the biggest challenges. There's certainly organizations that are providing relief for all over the world for people caught in war zones and people who have needs. And our church organizations are really good organizations to give through because they have vetted them. And our denominations often have um, specific funds that are set up exactly for the things we're wanting to help with. Um, so I would say, yeah, definitely take advantage of that. But I really think right now money isn't the most important thing. And when we're talking about what's going on in the Middle East, the 2 other things that we could do. One is obviously pray. Um, we're not going to fix this by ourselves. We got to ask God's help on changing people's hearts and minds because that's what it's going to take for peace to finally get about. So pray and pray for strength for ourselves to continue to do the things we need to do to work for peace. Jesus, said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." They're not the people who make peace at any cost. They're the ones who are willing to pay any cost to help peace happen. And we need to be those peacemakers. Um, Before I get on to the second thing, there's a scripture in Isaiah 2 that's we often hear read around Christmas time in our churches. It's they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And it was written at a time when the northern nation of Israel was facing extinction by the Assyrians. And basically, the whole first part of that section was saying to the nation of Israel at that time, it's like, you've really blown it. And in the Bible, what they mean by that is you haven't cared for the poor, you haven't cared for the needy, you've taken advantage of the widow, you've taken advantage of others. Um, and so, it's talking about punishment, but then it says, but there will be a day when nations won't learn war anymore. One of the gifts that was given to the United Nations in 1959 was a statue of a man beating a sword into a plowshare. Do you want to know who gave that? USSR.
Wow.
So you think about what it's doing in the USSR. There's, the USSR broke up. But nonetheless, you think about what Russia's doing now, and you just go back to 1959 and that sign of hope that came from the USSR that says, yes, we are working and hoping and praying for the day when we all beat our swords into plowshares and we don't learn war anymore. It's a reminder of God's promise there. But as you look at what's happened in the world since then, it's also a reminder of this next thing we can do. Pay attention to who we vote for our leaders.
Yeah. Well, and that's that. So that's the other thing that another friend of mine I learned from. She calls her congressman almost every day.
We got folks in our church who do the same thing.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to start doing the same, and because it is one way that our voice is heard.
Yes.
And all those calls are recorded.
And they tally how many are for something and how many are against something. Yep.
So it's a way to vote daily.
Yes.
And it's a way for our voices to be heard. So I think it's interesting. It's a phone call. We can put it on, speed dial.
Yeah, and emails have you can write an email or send a letter. They track all of those as well. So, if picking up the phone isn't your thing, shoot them an email. Definitely do that. But I think we need to be very specific about what we're asking for. But I also think we need to really pay attention to who the people we're voting for. What do they stand for?
Yes.
What are they after? And because we have the hot button issues that I think most of us kind of fall prey to. I certainly do sometimes. It's like, how do they feel about the death penalty? How do they feel about abortion? Those kinds of things. How do they feel about vaccines these days? Those kinds of things. But I think we need to go deeper than that and say, because I'm never going to agree with a politician on everything. No, it's just not going to happen. But what are those things that are most important for the health and well-being of our world and our children? And I think those are the questions we need to be asking of our politicians. How far are you willing to go to work for peace in Congress? I mean, let's start there. But I think, because it has to start close to home. If we can't find peace there, we're never going to be able to help peace happen anywhere else. But I think we need to pay attention to that and vote for those who truly have a track record of working for peace, working across the aisle, working for compromise, and not saying my way or the highway.
Yes. I've learned from my friend who's very into the political realm. So when I want to know what's up, I call her. But she said the League of Women Voters does a tremendous job of talking about, outline what you just did on every candidate. Like they do every candidate. Here's their voting record. Here's what they, here's their priorities or whatnot. So there is a resource.
And they are exceptionally good. Yes.
Yeah. So that's that. And then I got invited to a 2.5-day peace meditation retreat. I know. I know. This woman I really just said yes without knowing any details. I think it's a couple hours away, someplace in Minnesota. And it's like there's 15 sleeping quarters. So, if you room share. So, and I'm grateful it's an event that I don't have to curate.
Yes. I know what you mean.
But I thought, okay, I can do that. I can be with a group of humans who want to just kind of focus intentionally on creating peace.
Yes. I mean, I have to believe, looking at what's going on in the Congress right now, that if if we could get all of the people in the House of Representatives to take seriously going to a retreat like that, and then after that, take seriously learning how to truly listen, actively listen to each other, uh, then I think we could be in a much better space. Much better.
Wouldn't that be interesting? And
Yeah.
then I also just wanna say, I think what's happening in the House of Representatives is just a mirror of what's happening in Gaza and, in
Mhm.
Israel and whatnot, because there there are people who just want to have chaos and conflict.
Yes. Yes. They thrive on that.
They
That's where the
thrive
power
on
comes
that.
from.
There's probably somebody in everybody's family system who
Mhm.
that's they believe that's their job, right?
Yes.
Create some chaos and conflict. So, I'm I always try to like, well, what is my work to do? It's like, well,
Mhm.
where am I saw the sign the other day that the best form of activism is a combination of anger and action.
Yeah. I could go for that. Yeah. You gotta
You
have
know, it's like,
something that's burning you to get up out of your chair and do something.
and then do something. And
Yeah.
I just thought, okay, maybe I just need to lean into, kind of what my discomfort is. What am I, instead of just pretending it doesn't exist or glossing it over
Yeah.
or, just getting busy doing something. Maybe I need to lean into, that feeling like, what does it call me to do? And trust that that's kind of how spirit's talking to me. It's like, you're pissed off, Nancy, because there's something you can do about it.
Yeah. Mhm.
You
And so
know?
often we use being pissed off as an excuse to say, well, but there's nothing I can do. And yeah, but have we really looked to see if there's anything we can do? And usually we haven't. Um, but yeah, I mean, because anger without a healthy outlet is destructive, either to our community or to us internally.
Yeah,
Have a healthy outlet for it, and then everybody benefits.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Sue, we're at kind of the end of our time.
Mm.
Is there anything what closing
Yeah.
words?
I think what I would say is, whether this is encouraging or not, it's not the first time our world has been in this position. It won't be the last. And I think that what we can hold on to more than anything else is that even when we feel helpless, God is at work somewhere in this. And trust that God is doing something. And then it's just up to us to see the signs of where God is and say, how can I be a part of that? Whether it's big or little, because everything's needed. But know that we have made it through times like this before. I believe we will make it through this time as well. I don't think the world is going to be destroyed as a result of this. We will survive. We may be different. Um, we may not. Who knows? I don't know what the future holds, but trust that God is at work, and where God is at work, there's life, and there's hope, and there's possibility. So let's look for those signs, and let's put our energy there.
Mm, thank you.
Yeah.
Sue, as always, I appreciate our time together. I know our listeners do as well. And I wish you peace.
And I wish you as well. Thank you, and I look forward to our conversation next time. And time will tell to see what it's about, what's going on in the world, or what's on our hearts and minds then. So for everybody who's listening, stay tuned. Nancy and I have been talking about where this podcast might go and dealing with more current events instead of just what we talked about in the sermons. So expect more like this. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us at First Presbyterian Church, where faith is nurtured, curiosity encouraged, diversity welcomed, and all are loved. Find out more about us at fpclincoln.org.